matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
Hello everyone, my name is Simon. Welcome to my channel ContrCourant. What I'm going to be trying to do is use primary sources of information to explain topics that are relevant to our society in general. So today I will go into tuition increase. Specifically, I will try to answer the question, what happens when tuition increase? All the information is of course available to you in the description box below if you just go click on the link, because we have to be objective. We're dealing with society, we're dealing with important issues. I'm not here to tell you what I think is best or not. I think you're smart, you can make that conclusion for yourself. Tuition increase. If you did not know, the government is about to raise tuition by $325 a year for the next 5 years. If you count in the tuition increase of the early 2000s, well, this amounts to a raise of more than 100% in the last 10 years. There are 7 things that happen when you raise tuition. Before I dive into that, I want to give you a general picture of what's going on right now. The government has a deficit in 2011-2012 of $3.8 billion. The government wants to lower this deficit by $1.5 billion in the next 2 years. And tuition increases are part of this plan. Alright, now let's discuss why we need to talk about the financing of our institutions in the first place. Well, the main point is the cost of running a university is rising faster than the inflation rate. There's a few reasons why this is happening. Number one, the infrastructures are growing older. They were built in the 60s. We need to simply put more money to take care of them. Number two, we have less dropouts than we used to. There are more people graduating high school and graduating CJEPs that attend university. Lastly, the technology. This was not the case so much in the 80s, but in the 2000s, we definitely need computers. Definitely need a good Wi-Fi network, for example. And only that, but we need to upgrade this equipment ever faster. For all these reasons, it's costing more and more for universities to provide students with a suitable environment to study their stuff and get their diplomas. So we need to keep talking about how we're going to finance our universities and keep that in mind, that it's going to cost more in the future than it's costing now in relationship to the inflation rate. Now let's explore one of the 7 things that happens when tuition increases. That as tuition increases, the amount of money given for students and universities by the government goes down in proportion. This has to do with the help they provide in financial aid and the help they provide through operational grants. This was discovered by the National Commission of the Cost of Higher Education. That was the 1998, which concluded that for public 4-year institutions, the single most important factor associated with tuition increases has been decreasing revenue from government appropriations. That's what the report said. This creates problems because as the operational grants go down, the university has less money per student to provide services. So there is actually a theoretical cap at which the university has to go, wait. We don't have the money to include all these extra students, so we need to find a way to actually limit the number of entries in our institutions. And we actually have this system already in place. When the university asks you what your GPA average is, they ask you for a letter of recommendation, and all these other things that are meant to kind of level the playing field and exclude a certain part of the population. These are all proofs that the universities actually do not have the funding required to clear the market conditions. So, higher education, more limited entries into universities through means like GPA averages and letters of recommendation. So the second thing that happens is actually a very short one. It actually has to do with the fairness of the price we're being asked to pay compared to the price that the ruling class and the elites in our society used to pay in their time. If you look at the rhetoric that's being said right now in the mainstream media by the government, a lot of it centers around the notion that students should pay for their fair share. And if you look at the percentages of what we're being asked to pay, it is higher than what they were asked to pay when they were graduating. So I guess the system was good when they were in university. They didn't graduate with student debt. They didn't. But when it's our system and they're being asked to fund it, all of a sudden, oh yeah, sure, students pay their fair share. The second point that is unfair is that the infrastructure. They used it. We will also use it. But we will have to pay a bigger share of the infrastructure cost than they did because we're dealing with older infrastructure. This is unfair because I just started to use a university recently. I did not make it old. The older generation made it old by their usage of it, and they kind of got a free pass. They kind of just went through it, used it, and didn't pay for it. And now that it's used, we have to pay for its repair fees, and they don't. So that's the second argument. It's basically unfair for us to pay a higher share than they did back in their day. The third result of tuition increase is that some programs are going to be hit harder than other when you look at the choices that students will be making. Specifically, programs that are expected to earn you more money, such as engineering, mathematics, medicine, and dentistry, are going to be less affected by the tuition increase by other fields like social sciences and humanities. Why? Because students, even if they're being asked to pay more money, they expect to make enough money in the future so that, well, I can pay my debts even if I have more of it. Whereas students in psychology, such as myself, who do not expect to make a whole lot more money out of their BA, while we might choose not to go through our programs because the risk and the cost of having all this debt is more in our perception than the people doing mathematics or engineering. So that's the number one. Number two is in programs themselves, students might make different choices. For example, in medicine, you have various different specializations that you can choose to study in. However, some of them cost more than others. So this is the third argument. Students will choose and react to the tuition increase differently by their programs, and also they will react differently within a program, referring to the specific specializations of that specific program. Alright, now we're going to talk about the simplest but most shocking by far argument of this whole video. It turns out that for every $1,000 of tuition increase, enrollment drops by about 2 to 3%. And the estimation that was the most damaging and most surprising to me was that if the 1990s Canadian tuition increase of $2,000 did not occur, then in 2002, the proportion of the Canadian population who would have gone to university would not have been, as it was, 19%, but it would have been estimated to be 24%. Now that's 5% difference because it was 2,000. So, as tuition increased by layers of $1,000, enrollment is expected to drop by 2 to 3%. So the next thing that happens as tuition increase is that the students who are enrolled right now or doing a degree will not be the victims of the consequence of the increase as much as the upcoming students. And here's why. If you already invested energy and money into your degree, you're less likely to drop out of your program and you're more likely to finish your diploma. You've already started it, obviously. But if you're 9, 12, 15, I don't care, 6 years old, and the tuition is increasing at that point of your life, then your parents might decide that the cost is too high for them to help you get through university. As you know, there is a significant proportion of students, if not all of them, if not most of them, that will get their parents' help to pay for their education. What happens is that throughout their lives, young kids and adolescents live with parents who have the expectation that their kids are going to go to university. Parents will plan financially for that event. As tuition increase, the poor, they have to give a higher part of their earnings to the education of their kids, which is a more risky, which is a more unpleasant proposition for them. So they are more likely to just say, hey, you know what, it is not worth my financial participation. I do not think we have the earnings for my son or daughter to go to university. It is not worth it for them. It is too expensive. So I will no longer have this expectation for my kid to go to university. All right, now I'm going to talk about how tuition increase affects the rich differently from the poor. There's a few reasons for this, but let's start by talking about the debt level that a student gets when he's done with university. When a rich student graduates, the debts are statistically more likely to be lower because the parents are more likely to have financed the whole studying, right? The whole education of their kid. That's number one. Number two is, even if a poor person and a rich person, just to keep it simple, graduate with the same amount of debt, the rich person has less stress and preoccupation on their debt level because they have easier access to the financing. If they need money, they have their whole family who has money that is attainable, that is there, that is in a situation where you really need it, you can actually get access to that financing. But what happens to a person when that person graduates with a lot of debt? Well, economically, that person is more likely to have a safe job that gives that person the insurance that they will be able to pay their debts in due time than, let's say, somebody who has less debt. That's number one. Number two is you're more likely to wait later to start your family. You're more likely to wait to buy a house. You're more likely to wait to have kids. That there is a double hammer when tuition increase against poor students. Well, as you know, we have things like grants that help all sorts of students complete university financially. And a lot of grants are granted on the academic footing of the students. Hence, if the student is really good at school and he really worked hard, we as a society and the private sector too will help that student complete their studies. A rich student that comes from an affluent background is more likely to have advantages that are linked to that affluent background that the poor student did not have. You're more likely to have had educated parents who read to you, who don't have two jobs, spend more time with you, helped you with your homeworks. Statistically, you have more resources as a person from an affluent background. But if you're poor, you're more likely to have had a difficult life at school because you didn't have all the advantages, but also you probably were in a tougher environment, a school that was maybe you didn't go to a private school, you went to a public school, or you hung out with friends in your neighborhood that were maybe more prone to crime. Statistically, this is what happens. However, we offer the help to pay for university to students who are really good, and the students who are really good are also more likely to be rich. This is an argument from statistics, which means it exists as a trend, but that I completely concede that there are plenty of instances where rich people worked their asses off for their results, and poor people simply didn't do it. So all this is to show that the poor students are going to be affected differently than the rich students. The last thing that happens when tuition increases is that more international students will attend university. Wait, what am I talking about? I have no interest in only giving you a slanted view of things. I will give you both sides here. And this is actually very interesting. It turns out that there's a sub-market of international students that look for high-quality institutions, obviously. But the way they do so is they look at the cost of each institution. What they tell themselves is that, well, if it's more expensive, it has to be higher quality, right? So for this sub-market of international students, higher tuition fees will make them want to come to your institutions more. Now, how big is that sub-market? How does it apply to Canada versus, let's say, the United States, which is still very much more expensive? And if, on a whole, this is going to make a counterbalancing effect on the whole equation of the enrollment of the universities, that's an open question. But I found it interesting that for some people, tuition increase meant that they were more likely to go. So here, these were the 7 things I found on my research. I hope you found them enjoyable. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you found this interesting and you learned something today. It was an enjoyable experience. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Reflect, regroup, reject, reboot, recall, respond, rebel, reward, record, return, reform, reverse, refuse, repeat, refuse, revolt, reflect, regroup, reject, reboot, recall, respond, rebel, reward, record, return, reform, reverse, refuse.